Compromise is the key when it comes to immigration reform. That's what Arizona's two border congressmen say.
Democrats are going to vote for it just because of the enforcement. Also have to understand that there's a pathway in them that is the trade-off, and they have to accept that as well.
First of all, I'm very pleased that we have a bipartisan approach to this long-standing problem. We really need to fix the broken immigration system.
Modernizing immigration in Arizona and the nation. It's Arizona Week.
Production of Arizona Week is made possible in parts by a grant from the Stonewall Foundation and by the members of Arizona Public Media. Thank you for your continued support.
Once again, your moderator, Michael Chihak.
Immigration reform got 2/3 majority approval in the U.S. Senate last week. Now it's in the House of Representatives, where a greater degree of difficulty is expected. Here's our look at the Senate bill and its chances in the House from the perspectives of Arizona Democratic Congressman Raul Grijalva and Ron Barber. Your impression of the bill that passed the Senate last week on immigration reform?
It's historic. I'm glad it did. And I'm glad there's pressure on the House of Representatives to respond in kind. There's some flaws in it and significant flaws that are causing opposition from one end of the spectrum that, politically speaking, that would normally be pushing for comprehensive immigration reform. And that has to do with the additional, by the amendment by Corker to put additional $30 billion worth of security enforcement activity and personnel on the U.S.-Mexico border. Many of us, and I include myself, see it as overkill. We see it as excessive and potentially a problem for the eventual passage of something comprehensive immigration, something that we all want, which is comprehensive immigration reform. I understand it's part of the deal, and I understand pathway is the other, has to be essential to it, and many of us have tolerated much of this enforcement in an effort to get pathway, and here we are. But that's a major flaw.
In fact, you've called that a militarization of the border or a step toward that. Talk about that a little bit.
We're looking at potentially doubling the number of agents here in Arizona, which would bring us well over 10,000. And we're looking at some of the initial layouts, 6 to 7 helicopters, drones, a multitude of towers, sensors, and the point to finish the additional 750 miles of fence. All that's part of that, and not any real discussion about what that's going to impact. The comment I made is that the borderlands have a history and a culture of their own, but historically speaking, you are now putting a presence in there, and it's already heavily. There's heavy military presence now. You're doubling down on that presence, and I think in the long term, this will have generations from now, if this were to come into effect, a real effect on how the borderlands function and what they look like. And I don't think it's all positive effect.
First of all, I'm very pleased that we have a bipartisan approach to this long-standing problem. We really need to fix the broken immigration system in this country, and I think the majority of Americans feel that it's time for that. And I'm glad that the Senate has produced a bill that really covers the major principles that I'm concerned about. And now we have to see what will happen in the House. But the Senate bipartisan effort, I think, is to be commended.
So what's in that bill that you like a lot?
Well, first of all, I think it deals with the major issues that we have to tackle. I mean, for me, any immigration reform bill has to include certain factors. First of all, it has to be good for border security. I still have areas of my district that are not safe, where my constituents live in fear of their lives, quite frankly. We need to deal with that. While we've made progress on border security, we need to make more. Secondly, it needs to be good for our economy. One of the issues for the people who live in the border communities, as I represent, is that we have a difficulty bringing legal commercial traffic through. We have long waiting lines at the ports of entry. We need to have an immigration reform bill that deals with the need for more customs agents so that we can expedite the tourism and expedite commercial traffic. It also needs to be fair to people who have applied for visas to this country. and it has to be efficient and economical. So as I look at the various elements of the Senate bill, it I think deals with all of my concerns. When we look at border security, it definitely has a significant appropriation for more agents, more customs agents as well, who can help flow of traffic, expedite flow of traffic at the ports, legal traffic. It contains money for technology along the border. I think that's helpful. It has a temporary worker program which allows people to come here safely and legally and return to their home country to fill our employment needs. It has an enforcement element which will crack down on employers who hire illegally. We have to do that. It also allows for an expansion of the H-1B visa program, which allows high-tech workers to come and stay in our country to do the jobs that we need to have done. Unfortunately, we don't have enough of those individuals in our own country. And then it deals with the 11 million people who are here without documentation, who need to be brought out of the shadows and brought into the full light of day in terms of work and taxes and all the rest. I'm glad it's not an amnesty bill, which is what we had back when President Reagan was in office back in the 80s. This is much different, and I think it's balanced, it's fair, and I think it will help our economy. So those are the elements that I'm looking for in a bill. Hopefully we'll see a similar kind of effort in the House.
The Senate bill includes $46 billion for border security, including doubling of the size of the Border Patrol. Along Arizona's 370-mile line with Mexico, it will mean more facilities and technology, and an estimated 10,000 border agents, twice the current number. Barbara and Grijalva have differing points of view about what effects that will have. When it comes to border security, there are a lot of provisions in the bill, pretty specific, and a lot of money being spent. I think about $46 billion is what the Senate bill proposes. Are we coming close to a militarization of the border?
Well, I certainly don't want to see the border militarized, but I do want to see the border safe and secure. And to me, what's important about any allocation of money for border security is that we hold the Department of Homeland Security accountable for how they spend it. There has to be a transparent process. And unfortunately, we haven't had good accountability for a lot of the money we've given to the Homeland Security Department in the past.
Short of that militarization that you've just described, but beyond what we have now, how do we secure the border?
I think that the effort at securing the border has been, this administration, it's leads in deportation, leads in detentions, leads in almost doubling, if not tripling, the amount of Border Patrol agents on the border, and that deterrence, along with the economy, has lowered the entrance of unauthorized folk into this country to a trickle, if that. And so I think that the strategy in place, moving people closer to the border, using the ports of entry as the main focal point, both for economic development and commerce, and also as a security point, I think is the way to go. Technology is important. We should concentrate on that, and that has to be part of the package. But I think a comprehensive package is going to look at the humanitarian issues, 6,000 dead. Something has to be done about that. It's going to look at what we can do to encourage economic development along that border region. And it's also going to look at the long term. What is the security demand going to be in the future, and not get locked into a manpower, boots on the ground strategy, which maybe 10, 15 years from now is not going to be the strategy that works.
I'm a member of the Homeland Security Committee in the House, ranking member on the Subcommittee on Oversight, and two of the amendments that I had introduced to the border security bill that we passed unanimously not too long ago ensure that stakeholders, people who live and work along the border, both in communities as well as in the rural areas, and Border Patrol agents themselves will have something to say about the plans for implementing additional border security measures and will help design the measurements or the metrics. We can't do this in a vacuum. We have to have the people who live each day with border security issues play a role. That's been missing from the Department of Homeland Security, and my amendments that are included in the bill will hopefully take care of that problem.
Will that move us toward a more secure border without the spending of huge amounts of money and without disruption of other issues along the border, environmental issues, legal trade and economic traffic, as you've pointed out.
Well, it should never be an either or when it comes to the environment and border security. We can balance and must balance the two. We have to make sure that people feel safe in their homes, and this is what I think some of the border security money will help us do. The underlying bill from the Senate includes about 3,000 additional customs agents that will help move those lines faster so people can come into our country through the ports in Nogales and Douglas and Naco much more quickly. And those are good things. But the rest of the bill, and hopefully the one that will come out of the House, also deals with the numbers of people coming across. If we can have a way to bring people in legally and safely, we will cut down on the number of people coming here to work illegally. If we have enforcement on employers about hiring illegally, knowingly hiring people illegally, we will have less people wanting to come here because there won't be the magnet. That in and of itself will allow the Border Patrol and the customs agents, actually, to turn their attention to the most dangerous element of smuggling, which is the drug cartels and the money the drugs that they're bringing in and the money they're taking back to Mexico. We have to focus on them. They are a greater risk to our country than just about anything else.
Dealing with the estimated 11 million people in the country illegally, including 300,000 in Arizona, is key to reform. The two congressmen agree that a path to citizenship must be part of it. You mentioned that the border security issue and the conservative approach on it is the trade-off for the path to citizenship. Is the path to citizenship that's in the Senate version adequate at this point?
It's the compromise, and because it is a compromise and all of us had to give and take, yeah. I mean, it's doable and it's acceptable. One might add, though, that nowhere in the history of this country has a group of potential immigrants have to go through the hoops of a waiting period, a fine, learn English, and the background checks that this bill will require. So for people to say this is amnesty, it's automatic, you're rewarding illegality, I would challenge any of them to put their ancestors through the hoops that this generation of immigrants is going to have to go through.
They would argue, though, that their ancestors came legally to begin with. How do you respond to that?
You know, I did a little research on that, and I went back in the congressional records when the debates were really hot about the Italian Americans coming to this country, when the debate was really hard about the Irish with the Chinese Exclusion Act. And I read those 1800s, even the 1700s, and the names used on Italian American, German Americans, Irish Americans, Polish Americans, the language used, you can almost superimpose the primary Latino immigrant. If you changed the names, many of it would be the same. Un-American, different culture, don't fit in, taking jobs. So everybody has gone through these trials and tribulations.
Should border security be the trigger for people to begin the path to citizenship as is called for in the Senate version now?
Well, it remains to be seen what happens with the House in regard to any triggers. I believe we can move on more than one front at the same time. I think we can increase our border security efforts, increase our customs agent numbers so we can have better flow of traffic, and we can begin to move forward. An example is this. We have literally hundreds of thousands of young people in this country who came here through no fault of their own, when they were minors, some of them very small children, who for all practical purposes see themselves as Americans, but they're not legally documented. They want to go to school, they want to go into the military. I'm very strong supporter of the DREAM Act, which will allow them to do that. And I think most reasonable people would say that's a good thing to do. So I think that's an element that we can move forward on pretty quickly. We already have the deferred deportation, which is a step in that direction. I believe most Americans would like to see these young people complete their college education, go into the military if that's their choosing. That sort of thing can start quickly, as can a temporary worker program. The 11 million people in the country, that's going to take a lot longer to resolve, and maybe that's something that will be staged as we get more border security. But I really believe we have to start the process now. We're talking about a lot of moving parts. We need to get started on all of it, I believe, at the same time.
a good number of Republicans would say that the DREAM Act or any form of a path to citizenship is amnesty, and therefore they're against it.
Well,
how do you respond to that?
I don't support amnesty, and I don't think that's what the Senate bill proposes at all. If, for example, you're talking about the 11 million people who are here without documentation, not here legally, in order for them to go on a path to legal status, they would have to have a background check to make sure that not allowing people to come out of the shadows and stay here who have criminal backgrounds. They would have to pay fines and back taxes. They would have to learn English, and they would have to go to the back of the line. They shouldn't jump in front of people who are already applying for visas from their home countries. They should go to the back of the line. That's not an amnesty. Amnesty is a free pass. That's hardly a free pass. People have to take these actions in order to be considered for legal status, and I think that's the right way to go.
Just about everyone agrees that compromise is the way to reform immigration. Grijalva and Barber say it will be difficult for Democrats as well as Republicans. The House has been working on immigration in kind of a piecemeal method. There have been several bills introduced and that are moving through the House. You mentioned the Homeland Security bill that has some immigration elements to it, border security elements. Is that the right approach, or will the House at some point come out with a comprehensive bill?
Well, I'm not sure what the House will eventually do, but I believe that the only way to resolve this issue is to have a comprehensive approach. There are so many pieces to this. There's so many elements. I think to piecemeal it is really an approach that is almost going to bring no success, no bill that will be enacted that will deal with the bigger issues. Yes, there are piecemeal bills coming out of the Judiciary Committee in the House. However, there is a group of members of the House, 8 of them, now 7, who have been working for a long time on a comprehensive immigration reform bill, as well as a border security aspect, and that is waiting to be introduced as well. It remains to be seen what the Speaker will do, but I believe you have to take the broad view. You can't just do it piece by piece. I don't think we can succeed that way.
I think what's going to come out of the House is probably going to be more mean-spirited, more divisive, and I've described it as stalling tactics. The chairman of the Judiciary, Goodlatte, has said, we're going to do this piecemeal. And the first 4 bills that they've produced are essentially stripping away a lot of what's in the compromise on the Senate side. So, and the Gang of 7 in the House has not produced the bipartisan package. Luis Gutierrez assures us, and Javier Becerra assure us that they have a package, and they're kind of waiting for the timing on that. I think the strategy in the House, and I question it sometimes, is that let's produce whatever we do, no matter how bad it is, so we can go to conference, and then from there will emerge something like the Senate bill.
So your strategy would be, let's just get something passed, and then we can work it out in
Yeah,
conference?
I think there's some real dangers in that strategy, because if we leave it as it is, and the House produces what is being produced right now, all it will do to the Senate bill is lower it in terms of what we have already as a compromise, and that's not going to be good. And Boehner is stuck in this moral dilemma, and the Republican leadership is stuck in this moral dilemma, and because there's a humanitarian issue and a huge public policy issue and a huge political issue in front of him, and if he continues to insist that it must be the majority of the majority that moves a comprehensive package across, then we're in for some tough times. This bill is going to pass as a consequence of many, many Democrats and 30 or 40 Republicans. That's how Violence Against Women Act passed. That's how the budget passed, that it was that combination. And I think at some point, Boehner is going to have the pressure on him to let the Congress work its will. But to insist on majority of the majority kind of cripples our ability to put a comprehensive package together.
Do you see that as a reality, that United Democrats and 30 or 40 Republicans could make this happen?
I've seen it in 2 other major pieces, and on the defunding of the DREAM Act, which passed the House barely, we lost 3 Democrats and gained about 8 or 9 Republicans, and that was a symbolic vote. I kind of see that same equation, but with more members coming over. I think the pressure nationally, the pressure from business groups, churches, and major corporate interest in this country to pass immigration reform, particularly on my Republican colleagues, is going to be pretty intense.
Conservative Republicans will say, well, there aren't very many people in my district this affects. They have, because of gerrymandering or the way districts are drawn, they have very few Latinos in their district. They say, well, this isn't going to impact my election one way or another, or it will affect me negatively if I support it. How are they going to be brought around to this?
Well, I would appeal to their economic patriotism, if you will. I think that the immigration reform bill, whatever it looks like in the end, will have a great positive economic impact on the country. It will provide us with workers that we don't have in certain industries. It will provide for new tax revenues and new income to Medicare and Social Security, which will help the budget deficit and help the solvency of those programs. At the H-1B visa level, it will allow us to hire people who have technical skills that we need to help our burgeoning high-tech industry, bioscience industry. It's good for the economy, and that would be, I think, a compelling argument for anybody, no matter what district they represent. A lot has been said about appealing to the Latino voter, and that's, I'm sure, important. But we also have to look at this as an economic issue that is good for the country overall.
The impetus for this was the result of the presidential election last fall, when Obama won more than 70% of the Latino vote, and Republicans said, whoa, we better wake up and get something done here or we're going to lose, because the demographics going forward are not in favor of people who don't pay attention to the growing Latino population. We've talked about that before. Do you think that really makes a difference to Republicans who are in districts where they don't have very many Latinos?
Probably not, but
and that's a lot of Republican districts.
yeah, based on how the districts are cut up over the last few years, yes. But there are consequences to the attitude that we shouldn't do anything. The consequences are that you begin to marginalize yourself as a national party rather than a quick death. You're going to prolong this for a long period of time. And a chance at a presidential, lost. A chance at major Senate seats, lost. And so maybe they will hang on by their fingernails to the House of Representatives, but eventually that will slip. Because, not only was that vote significant for Latinos, Asian Americans who historically have split their vote, and sometimes favored Republicans in national elections, 83% voted for Obama. So this is an ongoing shift, and I think the leadership of the Republican Party at the highest level understand that in order to not be marginalized for the long term, they need to do something about immigration.
How easy or difficult will it be for the Democrats in the House to stay together on this issue?
There's going to be some difficulties, and I mentioned the issue of the militarization. That is going to be an agonizing issue for many members. Environmental community, making the waivers and all those laws along the border permanent, that's not met with a lot of support. And you have members, and I include myself, that listen closely to that constituency. You also have some of the unions that feel that the guest worker program is going to hurt the long-term salary opportunities for American workers and for guest workers. You have the opposition on the over-militarization by border folk. A colleague of mine has already stated publicly, a Democrat, who has in the past been a huge advocate of comprehensive reform, saying, if this Senate bill hits our floor, I'm voting no. And he's voting no based on that. So, we have, as Democrats, have issues to hold on to. And those that are going to vote for it, Democrats are going to vote for it just because of the enforcement, also have to understand that there's a pathway in them that is the trade-off, and they have to accept that as well.
Will the Democrats stay together on it? You mentioned there's diversity of thinking there as well. How important is it going to be for the Democrats to stay united?
Well, I think generally speaking that they will stay united. I mean, there are differences of opinion in the Democratic caucus, just like there are in the Republican caucus. But I think generally speaking, we want to see this done for all the right reasons. Good for the economy, good to make sure people are safe in their homes, good for what we need in terms of workforce, good in terms of 11 million people who are in the shadows. We don't know who they are, what they're doing, or where they live. I think that's not good for the country to have that kind of essentially hidden population. We have to, I think, so many good reasons for this. And I believe the Democratic caucus and many of the members of the Republican caucus will find common ground and eventually pass a bill.
Are you moving more toward an area of compromise as you're in Congress longer?
I don't think it has anything to do with mellowing. It has probably more to do with reality. And I spent time going to a lot of churches the last 4 or 5 months and talking to congregations, particularly evangelical churches, and talking to congregations where perhaps 60 to 70%, 50% of the congregants are undocumented. And so we'd have in the afternoon at the church come and talk to the congressman. And I laid out this is how tough this bill is. 18 years, background checks, learn English, pay a fine, you're provisional for 13 years before you even get a permanent green card, all these difficulties. And so what do you think? This gentleman kind of personified the response. He goes, with this permit, can I work? I said, yeah. With this permit, is my family safe and I can travel back and forth freely? Yes. I don't care if it's 25 years.
From the point of view of the gentleman you just quoted, that's a pragmatism that moves away from ideology that might exist either in the liberal camp or the conservative camp. Can Congress come to that pragmatism?
I hope they can.
Longer versions of my interviews with Grijalva and Barber are on our website, azweek.com. We'll bring you the points of view of Arizona's congressional Republicans as the legislation progresses. That's our program for Friday, July 5th, 2013. Next Friday, an interview with Pima Community College's new chancellor, Lee Lambert. For Arizona Week, I'm Michael Chihak.
Production of Arizona Week is made possible in parts by a grant from the Stonewall Foundation and by the members of Arizona Public Media. Thank you for your continued support.